Welcome to On the Bobble Podcast, episode 12. I'm your host, Sebastian J. Ueda, and with me is my co-host, Yuki Lee Bender. In this week's episode, we are going to give you an update and summary of our views on the Uprising draft format to help you prepare for Worlds or a local armory draft. In this episode, we will talk about cards that have under or overperformed our expectations, our thoughts on how to approach the draft format, and the key takeaways from the format. But before we go into any of that, how was your week, Yuki?
Yeah, my week's been pretty good. I've been kind of getting a little bit more testing in leading up to Worlds. Mostly just pretty big picture stuff right now, like trying to figure out how exactly all the different variants of Oldhim and Fi and Icelander all kind of line up against each other, because I feel like there's like multiple versions of those decks. And most people agree that those are kind of like three of the more popular decks, but it kind of depends on who you talk to and which version of the deck and how they're playing it. So there's a lot of factors. I'm just kind of trying to figure that out right now.
That seems fair. Do you have any decks that you want to start talking about now in CC before we move on to draft?
I guess so. Yeah, really briefly, I think Fi, I'm not sure I completely buy is as good as some people seem to think he is. I feel like at least the attack-based Icelander is like very reasonable in Defy, probably a little bit favored. And then I feel like Oldhim, if they're on a more assertive list, is also pretty good against Fi. It's just like the pure blockout fatigue that's not really going to be successful there. But that's not really how Oldhim's being built recently either. So yeah, I don't really buy that Fi is quite as good. I think he might be one of the better aggro decks, but I still think he's like kind of not as good to Ice and Oldhim. And honestly, I'm not convinced about Icelander's matchup into Oldhim. I think Oldhim might be good into Icelander, but I'm not sure.
Okay. Then one last question would be, what do you think is going to win the Battle Hardened next weekend?
I wonder if it's going to be an Oldhim. I feel like it might be an Oldhim.
Yeah, I got a feeling Oldhim's going to win.
I think Oldhim is good, and people have kind of temporarily moved away, but I think the reality is that he's still very good.
What you're telling me is Oldhim's going to win this Battle Hardened. I'm going to be playing Oldhim at Worlds now.
Maybe.
Sounds awful.
There's a lot of decks that could win, but, you know.
Okay, so let's just move on to some updates that we have about the channel, or in general.
Yeah, so number one, LSS was kind enough to give us a spoiler card that we'll be sharing on the YouTube channel. So we'll have a short video. That spoiler will be on Tuesday, November 1st. So we're part of the spoiler season and we have to wait until then. I was hoping to maybe tell you something like very small about the card on this episode, but it turns out that it's just stuck at the warehouse right now. So I'm sure it'll get here eventually, but yeah, just taking a little bit longer than expected.
Okay, that's fine. Maybe next week. Maybe next week you might have like a preview.
Yeah, exactly. And then the other thing I just wanted to shout out was I haven't actually tried it myself, but I've heard about draftfab.com being integrated with Talishar. I've kind of used them both independently. So I think essentially how it works is if you want to draft online, you can use draftfab.com to simulate packs in a booster draft. You do need people for this, so I don't think it's like integrated with matchmaking into Talishar. So you need like 8 people or 6 people if you want to do a 6-person draft. But you can do that on draftfab.com and then import those decks into Talishar and play them. So just pretty cool option if anybody is wanting to practice online for Worlds or just for fun.
Yeah, and just for those who don't know, Talishar.net is a platform to play Fab. It's a browser-based platform, so if you have an internet connection, you can play Fab.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, let's just move on to our main topic here. And we're just going to talk about the overperformers and underperformers of this format. We're going to talk about individual cards mostly. Do you want to start it off, Yuki?
Sure. So the first one that we have on here is Blue Sigil of Protection, particularly in Icelander. I think the thing to recognize here is that Aether Hail is already a great card, doing 2 damage and then 3 arcane. Blue Sigil of Protection, same rate, right? It stops 2 and then does 3. I will say that Sigil of Protection not being a 3 block and also not being an ice card for fusing or giving frostbites does make it a fair bit worse than Aether Hail. But that being said, Sigil of Protection is still just like very solid and a card I'm pretty happy to pick, and you often get late.
Yeah, and just like definition of overperformers and underperformers, we're considering a card an overperformer when it performs better than what we think that the general population thinks. So Blue Sigil Protection, for example, isn't better than like, as she said, Aether Hail, or like cards like Frosting. But how people perceive Blue Sigil Protection, like that card can come around like 13th pick, 12th pick easily, but we think it shouldn't go that late, and maybe you want to pick it up a little bit earlier, and that might be a spot where that could improve your game, and that's what we're going to consider an overperformer. Just under your general, whatever you evaluated it as, I think it's higher than what we think the general population evaluates it at.
Mm-hmm.
Well, moving on, I think the next card to talk about is Red Flex. So I think Red Flex is really strong. It is a pseudo popper. You do need to put more resources into it, but even then, like just being able to pop and end a Drill Meister is very powerful. But what's better about this card is just like on offense, a 0 for 4 is just a good rate on its card. So like its worst case scenario is just very good, and in the corner cases, it's just even better. So I think this card should be picked a little bit more highly than what's currently being picked. I think we can see these cards at like maybe even like as late as pick 5, pick 6 right now. And being a generic, I think it has more value than that.
Because like you often expect to play it as a 4 for 0, like you said, Jay, but just like sometimes even your opponent doesn't hit you that hard and you have 2 cards and you can't always spend 2 cards well as every class, but Flex is just like, yeah, I can do 2 cards to do 6. That's like on rate, or it can be a 4 for 0, which is just above rate. So like having the flexibility to do either or, it's kind of like Anathos and Bravo, right? Like you can do 1 card to do 4, or you can do 2 cards to do 6, and like being that flexibility is just so good.
Yeah, definitely. Just it's really funny. It's called Flex. Yeah, it's because it's flexible. Yeah. Okay, let's just move on to the next card. So next card is Dust Up. You wrote red and blue. Why not the yellow one?
The yellow is okay.
Yellow's okay. Does it attack for 3, yellow?
Yeah, yellow attacks for 3, so I don't like that it doesn't hit a breakpoint.
Okay. You want to talk about the blue one? I think the red one's pretty self-explanatory. It hits a breakpoint, blocks for 3, threatens Aether Wing. No, Ashwing. Aether Ashwing. Yeah, threatens an Aether Ashwing. But why do you think the blue one's good?
So I've kind of joked before that I think red Dust Up is kind of like Snatch. I think the on hit's like arguably slightly worse, but an Aether Ashwing is like pretty real value. Like that's a pretty decent on hit. And it just kind of almost feels like you like almost get a card out of the on hit. It's like not quite, but it's close. I just think that's really good. And then I like the blue because sometimes in Droma you can get these awkward hands where like you have like a red sweeping blows, but you don't have anything else big to do after it, and you can't really justify keeping 2 cards to swing for 3. And in those spots, just having like a blue, or like sometimes you might have like a several blue hand, and just being able to play a card that is a 1 card hand that kind of demands a card from them. Like if it doesn't, you get like pretty good value out of that blue. Is just really nice. The yellow is fine, but I just think since it's not a blue and it doesn't hit a breakpoint, it's kind of just not quite as good as the yellow.
That's fair. That's all fair. Okay, next card we have is Blue Sift and Critical Strike. I guess the common factor on these cards is the 3 block value on this. What about the other colors then? Why does it have to be blue?
I guess it doesn't have to be. I think Critical Strike in particular is quite a decent red or yellow. It's just an on-rate card that blocks 3. But I think the big thing is just them being generic and blocking 3, and Critical Strike in particular being a pretty real card.
Yeah, I think the block 3s in this format's very strong. Just like being able to block, I think just having your cards all block for 3. Typically, generics do only block for 2, but Critical Strike in particular is a common that blocks for 3, and Sift is probably an undervalued card that blocks for 3. And just essentially, if you just think of this card as a 3 block,
keep in mind that like a 3 block is literally 50% more than a 2 block. So you're getting like a whole like third of a card out of it, essentially.
just compare like 3 2 blocks for 6, about 2 3 blocks for 6. You can save a whole card if more of your hand is 3 blocks than 2 blocks. If you need to block out, like it's a real difference. Like it ends up being a card, and even might end up being like 2 or 3 cards through the course of the game. 3 blocks is very good in this format. But talking about blocks, let's talk about Blue Brother in Arms as well.
I like this one. I think particularly in Icelander because the 4 power is actually pretty good at killing dragons. Like a lot of the dragons you care about, like Miragai, Thamai, Chromai smaller, but it kills it. Just like the 4 kills a lot of things. And you can also pretty easily find a spot to have an extra resource floating and just get a 4 block out of this, which is really strong. Like if you have like a 0, like a frosting, and then you Waning Moon, you have 1 floating, and you just be like, oh, I'm just going to use this in block 4. Or you can do like an Ice Bolt for 3 and then use your 1 floating and not Waning Moon at all and save a card there. So I think that flexibility is just really, really premium, and I'm pretty happy. Like I actively kind of want 2 of these in my deck.
Yeah, I don't know if this card is undervalued though. I think people are correctly assessing that this card is good. I don't think I've seen Blue Brother in Arms in packs recently. At least in Vancouver. Not sure about the other metas, but yeah, or maybe it's just because Yuki's been picking them.
That might be why.
Okay, I guess that would make sense if we'll move on for now. The next card I have on the list is Cinderskin Devotion, specifically in the blue color. As we said with the blue Sifting Critical Strike, the 3 blocks is very important in this format, and I think you want your blues in Fi to be 3 blocks, and Cinderskin Devotion is basically the perfect card for it. Lava Vein Loyalty as well, but I think just like having that 1 extra power, even though you do need to pitch, if you do get into the late game situation, just having that 1 extra power can mean the difference of winning and losing. And if your hand's 4 blues, going down to your like second cycle, essentially, it's gonna make a difference. It's gonna make a difference being able to go like attack for 2 with Cinderskin, Ember Blade for 3, attack with something else, and then Phoenix Flame for 1. It's just like 2 is a big difference between 1. So I think Cinderskin Devotion is a little bit better than Lava Vein Loyalty, but I feel like people are picking Lava Vein Loyalty over Cinderskin Devotion right now. What do you think, Yuki?
Yeah, I think I agree, maybe particularly at blue. I think Lava Vein and red probably edges out Cinderskin for me, and I don't really love yellow of either of them, but
yeah, I don't like red or yellow on both Lava Vein or Cinderskin, honestly. But yeah. I think exactly blue Cinderskin versus blue Lava Vein Loyalty, I think I like Cinderskin Devotion a little bit better. It's not really like we get to pick all the time between those 2 cards, but I think people right now undervalue Cinderskin Devotion, and I think which is why I think it's an overperformer, where I think it's a lot better than what people think it is.
Mm-hmm.
Next card on the list is Arctic Incarceration. Is that right?
Yeah, Incarceration.
Yeah, this card's in red, super sweet in Icelander. I think this card's almost undervalued. This card just stops the whole Fi turn sometimes. Like if the Fi player doesn't have 2 blues, their turn essentially just ends, right? Like they have to pitch a blue, and if their hand is like red, 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 blue, then they have to pitch their blue just to beat the Arctic Incarceration. And then they have 3 reds if one of them costs 1. Unless they are all, what's it called? Leg taps? No, not leg taps. Other one. Head jabs. Yeah, unless they're all head jabs, their turn essentially bricks out, because then they have to pitch a red to start attacking with their head jabs, and then it becomes very difficult for them to activate Fi's ability efficiently. Arctic Incarceration can be the difference between you winning a game and losing the game against Fi as Icelander, and having one extra turn can mean the difference between you winning and losing a game. I think this card should go way earlier, and if you know you're Icelander, and because there's typically more Fis in a pod than other heroes, I think you need to pick this card very highly before the other Icelanders can pick it up.
I think it's a good card. I think it is it is a bit undervalued right now, so it is an overperformer. But I think also keep in mind it really is for that Fi matchup. It doesn't have much application into Dromai or Icelander. And I think given how popular Fi is, like you want to prioritize making sure you have a good sideboard for Fi. Or, you know, Fi, it's often 3 or 4. He's like roughly half of what you're going to be facing. So you definitely want to have a plan for it, but just keep in mind that it's not a live card against the other decks. So like 1 or 2 is probably good.
Oh yeah, you definitely don't want 3. If you have 3, you have, unless you have 45 Icelander cards, or sorry, not even 45. There's no 45 cards you can draft. It's 42.
Yeah, 42.
Yeah, if you have 42 playable cards, then I guess you can have 3. If you don't have enough playables and you're have to play a red Arctic Incarceration against the Icelander mirror or something like that, that could easily cost you the match. So next card on this list, or the last card on this list, is Strategic Planning. I wrote this down at exactly blue. So the sick part about this card is not even just for Icelander. Like, pretty clearly, Strategic Planning is good in Icelander, mostly at blue, because it costs 1. It combos well with Waning Moon, and then you get the bottom deck, like the Fi's Phoenix Flame. If they're only playing 1, they basically don't get access to it anymore. But I think this card is good in Fi and Dromai as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's just super solid blue. And I mean, I think part of it is that there's just not very many good generics in this set that you're happy to pick, besides like the poppers. At least early, like Oasis later is okay. But I feel like these blues, Strategic Planning, Blue Sift, and Blue Critical Strike, are just such nice cards to pick around like pick 3, 4, 5 ish, where maybe you want a little bit of flexibility in your draft. And it's just like, well, I can just get this blue, which I'm going to need. And this is just like a premium one that blocks for 3. And it's just always going to make my deck better no matter what. So if you're kind of like not exactly sure what deck you should be in, sometimes just having the flexibility to just be like, I'm just going to take a wild card is really, really strong.
Okay, let's move on to the underperformers. So these cards are what we thought would be very powerful, but then ended up being a lot worse, or in some of these cards' case, I just stopped picking these cards over, like, altogether. The first card on the list is Aether Ice Vein. Why did you put this card on the list, Yuki? I thought you loved this card.
I do still really like the card. I do still think it's good. I feel like people have been kind of hotter on Oasis Respite lately. And playing into this card and it getting Oasis can be pretty game losing. So I like having the effect. I think it's good, but I think you also have to be careful about thinking about when you want to resolve it, because it's just such a big commitment. Like, it's basically always a 3-card hand, or you arsenal it. So you miss a round of arsenal and then it's a 2-card hand. That part's kind of rough. And I think the other thing is that you need ice blues ideally in order to be able to fuse, so that you can then arsenal that card that you used. So I think because it specifically has to be ice blues and people value ice blues more, it kind of makes Aether Ice Vein not as good, because you have this like bottleneck of like, you can have like 5 Aether Ice Veins and then like 4 ice blues, and your deck is just not very strong because you can't fuse it reliably.
Yeah, I think this is an underperformer now, mostly because people has figured out more on how to draft Icelander better. So when you are sharing pools with like 2 Icelanders in your pool, or even 3, both of you are now fighting for Aether Ice Veins and blue ice cards, which then makes it thinner. When it was earlier in the format, when people had a little bit less idea of what Icelander wanted, you had a little bit more time to get the either Ice Veins or blue ice cards. And I think now that people know how, it's just a little bit worse.
Mm-hmm.
Next card on the list is Flame Call Awakening. This card is the Draconic card that attacks for 3 with Go again, and if you've played another red card this turn, you can find a Phoenix Flame to your hand. This is like one of the what people consider one of the premium starters for Fi or mid-turn cards.
Yeah, mid-turn.
Why is this card an underperformer?
I think it's okay. Like it can be quite powerful, and I would still pick it and put it in my deck. But I just think that there's better cards. Like I think like the head jabs are better. I think even the leg taps are better. I think what's awkward about Flame Call is just that it's a 1 for 3, which is below rate, unless you do the thing where you get the Phoenix Flame back. Because you have like specifically you kind of need a 0 cost starter, right? So you can go 0 cost starter, Flame Call, Ember Blade. If it's a 1 cost starter, it doesn't work. The 0 cost starters are harder and harder to come by. It just kind of makes it hard to get your Flame Call Awakening off. And even when you do, it's just on rate. So if it was just a leg tap, it would just always be on. I know that like there's some extra shenanigans with Phoenix Flame, like it being hard to block, and Heat Wave and things like that do matter, but it's marginal upside, I think.
Yeah, I think for me personally, Flame Call Awakening, like once you pick it and once you have it in your pool, you're really incentivized to play around it. And when you can't or when it fails to build around it, then the card just like underperforms quite a bit. And I tend to stay away from it unless like it's clearly open or that's the thing that you should be doing. Like getting past multiple Flame Call Awakenings or getting past cards that care like Rise from the Ashes. Okay, let's move on to our third card. It's Transmogrify. I'm gonna say it right now. I hate this card. I never pick it anymore. Like I picked it I think once or twice earlier in the format because I thought it would be like pretty strong by like turning your blue, what's it called? Sift? No, not Sift.
Dust Up?
Not Dust Up. The one that gives Ash.
Sweeping Blows.
Yes. So I hated this card because I thought it would make like it would be good combo with like Sweeping Blows, making a blue Sweeping Blows attack for a lot more, making people respect it. Blah blah blah. But the card just doesn't do anything, and it blocks for 2. So like you're like essentially forced to play this card aggressively, even on turns where you can't really afford to play aggressively. And then all it does is it makes your marginal cards a little bit better, and it doesn't actually like make it broken. So like it's almost not worth it. You having to play like you're getting forced. You're essentially like it's that card forces you to play in a specific way, and that doesn't always favor you. And that's why I don't like this card.
Yeah, I agree. The red, I'd have to be desperate for starters to even consider this card. Really prefer not to. It just always demands you to have a 3-card hand as well, right? Like you need a pitch for this, play the attack, and it has to be an attack that works with it, or else you don't get value. So there's just like a lot of things that it asks of you, and it doesn't block very well. I'm okay with playing the blue because a niche effect on a blue is a little more powerful since you can just pitch it away. That being said, I'm still valuing any blue 3 block over this. I would just say it's like probably like a slightly better one of the 2 blocks. Like it's better than like trade in for sure.
It's better than Sand Cover Blue.
Yeah, exactly. It's better than like Blue Oasis. Like it's not bad. You could do a lot worse than it, but any of the 3 blocks are just better because Dromai often needs to be able to block and draw out the game.
I think if you're in Dromai and you have to be and you're in a spot where you're forced to play Transmorpha you've either navigated the draft poorly or you're in a bad spot.
Yeah, I think I agree.
The last card I already talked about a little bit is Rise from the Ashes. I stopped picking this card like entirely, like the red one as well. Like I just do not play this card anymore. This actually comes from like it's not like I hate this card. When this card is good, it's definitely really strong. But I've stayed or I've tried to move away from cards like Flame Call Awakening, Rise from the Ashes, because it essentially forces you to add a Phoenix Flame into your deck. I think I'm scarred from the times where I'm playing the Fimir and I draw the Phoenix Flame and it doesn't block and I lose. Like I just don't want that to ever happen. And whenever you draw the Phoenix Flame, you have to like what can you do with it? You have to either pitch it and it just doesn't generate you enough mana. Sorry, resources. Or you attack with it and you have to pop your Heat Wave and attacks for 2. Like you needed to have this equipment for your Heat Wave to have even like the power level of a random blue or a random yellow. I'm saying this really bad, but this card essentially forces you to build your deck in a way that is not favorable for you, and then which is why I just stay away from this card overall. Like maybe if this card give like +5 to your next attack, then it might be worth it, but it just doesn't do that. It's just comparable to any other starter.
And I think the fact that it doesn't give you a chain link is pretty bad. Like if you only have the Phoenix Flame in your discard, sometimes you can like do a thing where you close the chain and then open the chain again and then get the Phoenix Flame back again, but like usually you can't. Whenever you can't, if you don't have another Phoenix Flame, that's just a damage you're missing out on. So the red one is like a 2 for 0, which is what a yellow head jab does, but it doesn't pitch yellow. So it's just, yeah, it's just like 1 under rate unless you have a second Phoenix Flame. And even then it's just like solid.
Okay, any other underperformers off the top of your head?
I think that's all I can think of. Those are the big ones, at least. Are there any for you?
No. I think these are it. I think almost all the other cards are like fairly properly rated. I just think that mostly the Rise is really like basically when I'm looking at packs for like as the Fi drafter, tend to realize that Rise from the Ashes are missing from packs or like they're not coming around. And I think people are just overvaluing this card just a little bit too much right now. Okay, let's move on to how we approach the Uprising draft. Did you want to start, Yuki?
Sure. So I feel like at the start of the draft, you should be picking powerful cards. I think that the good cards in Uprising are just so much better than the other ones, and you really want to prioritize getting those early. Usually I like to start in Icelander or Dromai. But if I am in Dromai, I want to kind of hedge. Even in Icelander, I'll often kind of hedge. So I might pick like 2 Icelander cards, a Dromai card, and a generic. And then I'm like, I kind of have some options. So somewhere in those first 4 cards, I'll try and take like a nice blue 3 block or something, and then just have some options from there. And then usually you can pivot to Fi around then if it becomes clear that you really should be Fi and it's open. So I've been liking where that lands me. I just have to remember not to commit too hard to Dromai.
Okay, but when's the last time you drafted Fi?
Maybe like
number of drafts, not time frame, because people won't understand time frame.
No, I'm thinking like 7 drafts.
What is that like at? Did you draft Fi at Nationals or was it before that?
No, it was before that.
So like you're not drafting Fi ever anymore, essentially.
I mean, occasionally I do.
Okay, so going into the way I approach the draft format, it's quite a bit different from how Yuki does it. I'm typically looking out for premium 5 cards, pack 1, pick 1. I'm talking Red Anger, just the red head jabs, Sasha Sandakai, and the shoes, the ninja shoes. I'm not sure what it's called, but the ninja shoes. Or Lava Burst. That's the 5th card. If I don't see any of those cards, and then I'm picking up an Icelander or Dromai card, because I don't want to fight for Fi for the non-premium cards. I definitely want to prioritize trying to get into like a broken Fi deck if possible. Even if I pick a premium Fi cards, I'm still going to be looking for the premium equipment for the other classes in the first 4 picks. So if I get like premium fire card, and then I get past something like a Spellfire Cloak or a Silken Form, that might be enough for me to start to move away from Fi, even just with one of those two cards. Because decks like Icelander decks with a Spellfire Cloak or a Dromai deck with a Silken Form, they're just way more powerful than what anything else you can do in this format, at least in my opinion. So that's what I'm looking out for. Otherwise, I'm basically going to be on Fi. Um, and like if I get lucky and open up a Spellfire Cloak pack one, pick one, that's my signal. That's my signal to go in, you know? But not a signal, just, I'm gonna force it, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I also agree that Dromai and Icelander tend to be the more powerful decks when they come together at their ceiling. And I think that's probably why I bias towards them a little bit. I feel like Fi is very, very good and very consistent, but I do feel like he can kind of struggle into Icelander sometimes, even with a good deck. And because of that, I tend to favor not picking him, but
You
I
just
think
need
he's
to
also
pick.
fine.
You just need to pick 12 blues. Just make sure you have the 4 sideboard blues against Icelander.
Yeah, I guess maybe if I forced Fi, I would have more blues in my sideboard.
Exactly. You gotta pick Cinderskin Devotion blue higher.
True, true.
Okay. Uh, and before we move on, I just want to talk about something we talked about in the car. What was it? The Saturday after the drafts we did. We were talking about Singe versus Aether Dart in exactly Icelander. And I thought this a conversation was like pretty interesting. Like I am definitely on the Singe train. Like I want blue Singe in my deck, like over blue Aether Dart. And then Yuki was like, "No, Aether Dart blue is significantly better than Singe blue, or not significantly, but marginally better." I think is what she said.
Yeah, I think that's true.
But like Singe does one more damage, right? Like if you want to try and pop a Dromite Dragon, like you pop an Ashwing, you do 1 damage, you can Waning Moon for 3. It's just like so much cleaner with your resources if you're pitching a blue, or if you have a deck that can pitch a blue every turn.
Yeah, I guess I feel like a lot of times when you play against Dromai, if they're attacking you with Ashwings, they often have cards in hand. And so the 1 damage ends up not mattering because they're able to pitch and stop it in your moon anyways. Like they're like holding 2 cards, and you're like, I don't really want to spend a whole card to the waning moon and do this for 1, and like maybe chip you 1 damage if I'm lucky. So I think just like having Aether Dart as an option to just kill an Ashwing and then end their turn, because like often, yeah, they're the ones that have momentum when they're attacking you, and when they don't, like you don't need to pop it because they don't have go again or something, and they're just like sending an Ashwing in. You don't really care.
But isn't the 1 damage like real? Like in the Dromai Icelander matchup, you're gonna be playing games where like basically every point matters. Dromai is really good at putting up Arcane Barrier, and like when you get to Singe them, that like it gets rid of their Arcane Barrier. And isn't that the turn you want a Waning Moon? Is when they don't have Ashwings?
I guess I think that my opponent often ends up getting a bunch of Ashwings anyways.
Oh, so you're assuming that they have like multiple Ashwings anyways.
I feel like they usually do.
Hmm.
Like I just don't like putting that much work into managing them.
Okay. I guess my question would be like, when you play the Dromai matchup as Icelander, do you not prioritize getting rid of all the Ashwings?
Not really.
Okay. I think the way that I play, like, I would attack an Ashwing with Brother in Arms. Like,
Whoa. No way.
yeah, like that's just what I do all the time. Like,
That's like exact opposite of me. So I will kill Ashwings if it's like a Singe or it's a very, very low damage spell. Or if I have like a blue in Arsenal, I'll probably kill an Ashwing with the blue because it's just very efficient to do so. And then I still get a Waning Moon them. But other than that, I'm choosing to just pressure phase. And basically, what I find is that if you just hit them really hard on your turn, like you hit them for like an Ice Bolt and a Waning Moon for 7, and then you just go to their turn and you get to, I don't know, 4 them or something, and they don't have 11 pitch in their hand, and they can't stop at all. So they're just sitting there doing nothing but pitching to you, and then they take like 5 damage every turn cycles or so. So that's kind of how I've been winning the matchup. If they block.
The way that I've been playing the matchup is I just make sure they don't have any Ash Wings on the board, because that's typically the way that they can stop your red, like Ice Veins or like Frost Bolts, like the bigger red spells. Basically, if they have like 4 Ash Wings, they can just AB4, AB5 it. So I tend to clear all the Ash Wings as soon as possible, and then put in like 4 or 5 Waning Moons at their face, and basically make them in these really awkward spots where they could like pitch a red and prevent one of it and then take the 2, or they could pitch a blue and prevent one of it and take 2 still. So like they have to commit 1 card each time they want to prevent 1 arcane. And I don't really give them an opportunity to, like, if they pitch the blue for their AB1, I don't really give them the opportunity to use their floating resources on that same turn. I try to like divide it in the most awkward way possible so they can't prevent or use their resources efficiently.
Right.
So like I would commonly like, like if they have 1 Ashwing left and like my hand is Brother in Arms, just it's going at that little dragon, like I'm killing that dragon, arsenaling a blue, and I'm gonna Waiting Boon the next turn. And like if they want to prevent it, they have to do something, like if they don't want to AB1 it, like it's like that's how I approach that matchup. So yeah, I guess we approached that matchup very differently.
Apparently. Yeah. I'll deal with the dragons, but typically I won't deal with the Ashwings aside from my blues. I want to just be hyper efficient. Because like I feel like you can get fatigued if they're good at pressuring you.
Do you know what's really funny though?
What?
I just ignore big dragons. Like they play a Necria, that Necria is gonna hit me 4 times.
That's wild. The dragon can just solo you. I feel like you have to deal with it.
Yeah, but if they don't have Ashwings, they can't AB1 you.
Fascinating. We approach the matchup completely differently. I kill them all the time. I usually have a bunch of big red spells, so I'm just like, okay. And if I can't kill it efficiently, I'll just freeze it and then deal with it next turn.
Oh, I do freeze big dragons a lot. I think is it the helmet that does it? Yeah, it's the helmet that does it. Yeah, I think the helmet's very good in the Dromai Icelander matchup. And when you get to freeze a big dragon for 1 turn, it feels so good. But yeah, I think Kyloria is the only one that I typically deal with, just because like the on hit's so good at generating value.
And Thamai, surely.
Thamai. Oh yes, Thamai has to die. Thamai is not fair. Okay, that card is just not fair. Like, how's that card fair? Like, it says Icelander don't get to play.
Well, that's why I draft all the big red, so I can just kill it. That's why you like blue Brother in Arms. It just kills Thamais. Sometimes you have a hand of all blues, and you're just like, oh, sweet. I'm glad you spent 2 cards to attack me for 3. I'll kill it.
Oh wow! I'm in the way that I build Icelander decks. My opponent plays a Thamai. I'm just like praying to God I draw one of my 4 damage spells, and a lot of the times I just don't, and I lose.
Yeah, it sounds like a very different approach. Very interesting.
Okay, well, let's move on to the hot takes on this format. Not even hot takes, just regular takes. Do you want to just take turns reading it out?
Sure, yeah. The idea here is just to kind of summarize the format for you. Maybe it's been a little bit since you last drafted it and you want a bit of a refresher. These takes just are sort of like some key points to keep in mind when you're going to your next draft. So our first take is, in general, you should go second if you win the dice roll. I think you need a really good reason to want to go first. And I think the only place where it gets pretty interesting is in like the Icelander mirror, I suppose, or like arguably like versus Dromai, but I still like going second against Dromai, I think.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Just go second. There's almost no exception. Just go second. You can't go wrong. Even in the Icelander mirror, if you go second, you're not doing that much of a disfavor to yourself.
I think the one big exception would be if I don't have AB in the mirror. I'm probably a little more incentivized to go first, just because you can take so much damage. Like you can pitch into Miter, but you don't get a stock that much. So I think in that situation, I like going first. But
Our second point is starting all in on Dromai is a trap. Just we reviewed what was his name, Matt Rogers.
Yeah, Matt Rogers.
Matt Rogers' draft and his all-in strategy on Dromai worked, but this is most definitely a trap.
Yeah. I think there's some validity to this strategy. Clearly, like Matt Rogers is a very good player, but I've tried doing this in spots where I had like a really good Dromai start, like not even forcing it, like I guess sort of forcing, but forcing it for good like premium cards, but then just getting cut. And just like starting with like 4 Dromai cards, like I had like a Chromai, a Mirror Guy, a Rake the Embers, and a Dust Up or something. And then next pack, there's just 0 Dromai cards in the pack. And it's like, oh, I just can't draft this. So I think that just the fact that like, even if there's just like one player passing to you that's forcing or doing the same thing, or it's just in Dromai, like you can be in a really, really, really bad spot. And Dromai is particularly vulnerable to that because she's so thin. So I think you can pick some Dromai cards, but you want to make sure that you're hedging and you have options to go something else if it doesn't work out.
Next one.
Oh, sure. You should prioritize power level in your early picks. So I kind of mentioned it earlier, but I think that the powerful cards in this format are just few and far between, and you really want them. So those like Blaze Headlongs that are just worth 1 extra point are just, they matter so much in this format. And you should be trying to make sure that you're prioritizing your premium picks on those cards, because I think they're very highly contested. This could be like your Spellfire Cloak or your Sash of Zendikar or etc. Like I would just take a card regardless of whether it goes with your other cards. Just make sure you're picking powerful cards. If you want to solidify in a hero early, you can, but make sure that you're not doing it for mediocre cards. Make sure they're at least on power level.
Yeah, just a lot of the cards in general in this set are very similar to each other. Like Frosting and Aether Dart is basically the same card. The Searing Strike and the leg tap, the other one that I don't know the name of with no text. They're basically the same card. All of the head jabs are all the same card. Dromai has a little bit of a difference, but like they all have the same rate. So whenever a card has higher rate, it's a good time to like pick them up, and you're gonna get all the replacement level cards all like just throughout the pack anyways. So number 4 is next point. Make sure you won't be burning more than 3 picks when you pivot. So this is just simply do not pivot too late, right? If you're going to pivot, you have to make sure you can do it early enough. Once you burn more than 3 picks, so like 4 or 5 cards, you're going to run out of playables. It's simple math is you end up with 42 cards. If you pivot too late with like 5 cards deep, you only have 37 cards to play with. And then if like 2 or 3 of those picks are your equipment slot, you're just not going to have enough playables. You're going to end up with a crack bauble in your deck, and you really just want to avoid that spot. So you really can't afford to throw away 4 picks, 5 picks. Mostly if when your 14th card in each pack might be a dud. It might just be for a different class. You can't control that last card. Make sure if you pivot early.
I think that's why Dromai is kind of like the most scary to start as, because Dromai just like you can't pivot out of it early, and the good Dromai cards are Dromai cards. Like she doesn't have as much flexibility with like generics, or she doesn't have as deep a card pool as Fi. So if you do get cut off and you try to pivot, you're just never going to have anywhere near enough playables. And but yeah, just even past like the 4 cards, like I had to pivot. I did this recently. I've started 4 Dromai cards, pivot to Icelander because it was exceedingly open. I got cut. Yeah, even though I got cut and I made the correct call, I ended up playing like 2 what is that card? 2 red Read the Ripples in my deck because I only had exactly 30 cards, and it was that or a bauble. So and every time I drew them, I was just like, wow, this card is really bad. Like I just have to do a 2 block. Like it's like a forced 2 block. There's nothing else the card does.
So next point is Spellfire Cloak and Sash of Sandakai are some of the best cards in the set. I don't know what else to say about this. They are just the best cards in the set.
Pick them early and often, and if somebody passes you, snap it up. If you start with one and somebody passes you the second one, just draft the second one, and then no matter what, you're set. Like it's great.
And the next point, sideboard cards for specific matchups are premium. You want to go into it?
Yeah, so I think that basically in Uprising, your strategy needs to shift depending on what hero you're playing against. Maybe even more so than Tales of Aria. Like I think Flesh and Blood in general is a little bit like this for sure, but I think that Uprising even more so because like if you think about like I think it's just like the cards that are good in a matchup are like not necessarily good everywhere. And so if you take the example of like we talked about, for example, like Red Singe. Well, we didn't talk about the red so much, but if you think of like Red Singe, you can play a Red Singe and kill 3 Ashwings, and that's fantastic. But if you're playing it into Fi or Icelander, it's just a horrible card. And same thing with Arctic Incarceration. Very, very effective against Fi, but in the Icelander mirror, it doesn't really do anything because they can play at instant speed if they want to. And against Dromai, you're often trying to kill them, not slow them down. So it's not exactly what you want to be doing there either. So, and a lot of the sideboard cards are kind of like this, like hyper specific. And so you don't want to have to play them, and making sure but they're also important. So make sure you have access to them.
Okay, I want to add on to this, but I'm going to add it on to it with the next take, which is 3 blocks are premium. And the reason I say I want to add on to the sideboarding cards for specific matchups is because 3 blocks are premium, and when you're playing against Fi, they're even more premium. So even if they're like a bad card, in like a bad generic, like not even a bad generic, we say these cards are overperformers. We're talking about Blue Sift, Blue Critical Strike, even the Yellow Sift, Yellow Critical Strikes. These cards get really, really, not really, really, just like more important in the 5 matchup, where the 3 blocks gonna matter so much, and it's gonna be the difference between you being able to win or lose the game. And that's just because Ember Blade attacks for 3, and then you always have a place to put your 3 block at. And this is gonna be very important in this matchup or in this game because Fi is just the most popular hero drafted in Uprising, in the Uprising format. And when you have 3 blocks against the most popular deck, that's just like you need at least this to be able to beat that matchup, I think is what I want to say.
Fi just so quickly gets you to life total where you have to block that you need to be able to protect it so that you get more than like 1 or 2 turns. And because that's the case, you really have to be able to block as the other decks. Otherwise, you're just in so much trouble. So yeah, I think the 3 blocks are super important. And then even in the mirror, as we know, like going second is quite nice, and you can really get ahead early and it can be swingy, but the 3 blocks do help you navigate that. And maybe sometimes, like even if you do have to go first, you can kind of block, soak up enough damage, and then get in and can catch up.
Okay, and the last point is life total matters. This is not just for 5, but in every matchup, life total is going to matter. You need to make sure you manage your life total, or you're gonna get into a spot where if you don't really keep track of like making sure your life total is high, you're gonna get in a spot where you're like, oh, I need to block. Oh, my blocks are super inefficient. Wow, my turn's just really bad. Oh, now I give my opponent a 4-card hand, and it's gonna come at me for like, if it's 5, it can come out for me for 14, and then I'm gonna lose. Or if it's Icelander, it's gonna be like 7 Arcane or something, and I'm gonna lose. Yeah, like you just need to make sure you manage your life total and be very conscious about where you are and where your opponent's at in this format.
I agree with all of that. I think the decks in this format are all just so good at being explosive, and I guess Icelander at being kind of evasive and forcing damage through. They're all basically able to make you take damage, even if you do nothing but block. And because of that, when you get low, like you're just kind of in danger, and because they can push damage so consistently, you just going to have to keep blocking and blocking and blocking, and you'll slowly leak damage and lose. So like even Dromai with like a red sweeping blow into red Ember Maw, 3 cards for 11 damage. If you let yourself get down to like 8, you're gonna have to block with 2 cards. Like you just are. And if they have a dragon in there, it gets even worse. Like I think I did this to a Fi. I had a Necria out, and then it's just like, oh, you didn't kill my Necria? Okay, keep 3 cards, 3, 4, 8. You're just pushing 15 damage at them, and it's just out of control. So you really need to make sure you stay out of range for as long as you can, and give yourself time to be able to enact your game plan before you have to block.
Okay, and that was our last take. If you think there's anything else you guys want to add, like the listeners, just comment down below. I think there may be some things we missed about the format, or yeah, but I think we covered most of it.
Yeah, I think so. Hopefully a good refresher for anybody, who maybe hasn't drafted in a while or is going to World soon. Just some of our thoughts on the format and kind of where we're at with it right now. I do kind of want to mention our episode next week, I think, will be a fun one. We're hoping to get some draft footage of we're going to be doing like a bit of a draft camp. So we're hoping to get a bit of draft footage of one of us drafting, hopefully, and kind of go through that and break down those drafts with you. So I think that will be an interesting episode, hopefully, for a lot of you. And I'm looking forward to doing that.
Yeah. Do you want to just close out the episode?
Yeah. So as always, thank you for listening. If you have any questions, please reach out to our show in the comments section on our most recent YouTube video. Any of your comments or questions really, really do help us. Really appreciate that. And you can also submit your questions to me on Twitter at UKLeeBender, or you can email onthebobble@gmail.com to get in touch with Jay. And so yeah, anytime you want to give back to the show by giving us like any feedback or comments or any kind of interaction like that, it really just does mean a lot to us. So
okay, sign off.
Oh, I took your sign off.
It's all good. We'll still talk about it a little bit more. We are gonna, as Yuki mentioned, I'm going to host a all-day draft for Uprising to prepare for Worlds. Hopefully I can get in like 5 drafts, if cross my fingers if people are willing, or play fast enough and stuff like that. Just want to talk about the format that we're gonna use. This comes like directly from like grinding Magic back in the day, but team money drafts. Yeah, that's what it's called. Team money drafts. Essentially what it is each player puts up $10 or $20. We're doing like a modified team money draft, but so each person puts up about 5, 10, 20, depends on the stakes we're gonna play. But after the draft portion is over, we're going to separate into 2 random teams. We're not gonna be doing like we're not gonna make the teams before, just so then like people won't have incentive to like excessively cut each other. I want to simulate like a regular draft essentially. And then we're going to separate it into 2 teams. And when we separate into 2 teams, what's really important about this step is that now everyone on the team has incentive to help each other basically build the best deck possible with the cards they built. And then this gives enough time to like, make a discussion on like, how do you build this? How do you think? What do you think? Oh, what's my 30th card? Are you sure? Blah, blah, blah. Like all of just that whole discussion portion is going to be important. And you just don't have this at like a regular draft where you're talking with like your peers essentially of like, how do I make my deck better with the cards I drafted? And I think it's just like an important step at getting better at draft and and being able to do 4 or 5 drafts in a day. Chef's kiss. It's so good. Like it's I'm so excited for this weekend.
Yeah, it's always a lot of fun. And I think what you'll find is when you play for like a little bit of money and you have You have the team environment, like just that incentive to being really invested in your whole team doing well means people are like really paying attention to the matches. You often end up talking about them. You talk about the deck building, like Jay said, and even though sometimes those players might help you out at a draft or whatever, it's a little bit different when they're kind of so directly invested and kind of like also almost part of the process rather than just 2 minutes between rounds. Oh yeah, this looks okay, but don't really have time to like lay it out and give you like a full discussion.
Yeah, I think if you really are going to like go to Worlds, doing something like this where you can gather a bunch of people. Yeah, I think all four of us from Vancouver that's going to Worlds is going to be there, right? Yeah, I think they are. Ian,
Mm-hmm.
Clay, yourself, and myself.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, and then we just got four other guys from our local area that was just willing to draft all day. And honestly, like skill level doesn't really matter in these things because it is a team draft. You can get carried. You can go 0-3. You can have your team help you build your decks. Like even if you don't think you quote unquote deserve to be there, or you don't think it's like you if you think you're like not as good as all the other people, and like but you want to still get involved, you should definitely get involved. Like players like us, we're definitely looking for more people to draft with. It's hard to get people to draft with. Like this game is still quite small, so getting 8 people for all day very hard. So even if you're even a little bit interested, you should go and talk to like the top players in your area, and if they're even hosting or even thinking about doing something like this, and show your interest. And if you do, they might be like was maybe they were looking for someone that was like willing to draft for like 7 hours, 9 hours, have a good lunch or dinner or blah blah blah. Like it's a good way to improve the game and make new friends. Yeah, that's all I have to say.
I feel like I had something, but I can't.
Nothing.
Ah, okay, we can just close it out then.
Okay. All right, good night everyone.
Thanks for watching. I say watching, I should say listening. Anyway, that's fine. Next time.
It's in it this time then.